Hello, hey everybody, welcome. Hi, I'm Mike Elson, founder of VoiceLessons.com. With me I have Dr. Matthew Edwards. Matt, thanks for joining.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, hey, we're just going to do another live Q&A this week. This week, we're just going to go through some more of the questions. These questions, it's one of my favorite parts of founding VoiceLessons.com is just getting all these questions that come in from singers and teachers wanting to know more about singing and improving their voice. So we're just going to jump into some of these questions. And we do this as a free service just to share this information and knowledge with as many people as we possibly can. So let's just jump right on into the first question here. I think this is the first one. All right, so this one comes in from Jenna. Are voice parts really a thing, or do some people naturally know how to work some parts of their voice better? So what do you mean, like voice parts? Like I'm thinking, first thing I thought, is she talking about like parts you sing in a choir, like soprano, alto, tenor? Or is she talking about like, is there like a button on your voice to do this?
Good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. So yes, to all of the above. So yeah, there are voice parts to a certain extent. So what we want to first understand is that idea of voice types actually is a European kind of concept is where it started, right? So it started over in Europe with churches as they were starting to develop written music notation, and they were developing choirs, and they needed a way to kind of get people to, get into, soprano lines, higher lines, mezzo, alto, tenor, and bass, and so they started dividing people up. But outside of, the European culture, if you look at world music, people don't necessarily classify themselves in a voice part. So kind of yes and no, right? In some parts of the world, people do really stick to those voice parts in certain genres, like musical theater and opera, classical music, some church music, choir music, they stick to voice parts. But in the rest of the world, in different world music traditions, people just sing. And they have different timbres. They might have different names to quantify it or, call it by. But singer-songwriters, I don't know many singer-songwriters that sit around and obsess about whether they're a bass, a baritone, or a tenor. They're more interested in telling a story and whether their voice can tell that story or not, and then they want to expand their range, etc. So I would say on that question about voice parts being really a thing, yes and no. So do some people naturally know how to sing tenor, soprano, tenor, bass? Yeah, some do, right? So some people come in, like Mike is clearly a tenor. You listen to him talk, the high notes are there. You listen to me, I'm clearly not, as I speak, not a tenor. Then you have some voices that are a little bit more ambiguous, and they can kind of float in between different vocal ranges depending on how loud, how long you're hanging on a high note, etc. Now, on the other side of it, are there really parts to the voice? And the answer to that is yes. So we can break the voice down to having the structure, and the structure is your skeleton. Your skeleton, of course, is held in place by the muscles of the body that help hold you in an upright position when you stand. You have the respiratory system, which is your lungs, which gives you the power to sing. You have the vibrating mechanism, which are your vocal folds. These little guys, well, it's big in this, but these guys that buzz and vibrate when we sing, that creates the inside of a sound. So those are real. And then we have what's called the vocal tract. And this is an example of a head. The vocal tract starts down here where the vocal folds are and extends all the way up to the opening of the lips. And so in here we have the lips, the tongue, the soft palate. We have the back of the tongue. We have the epilarynx. And then the larynx itself moves up and down. So those parts do actually exist. And whether or not some people naturally know how to do that, well, the answer to that is yes. But now, what do we mean by naturally, right? And that gets down into this whole nature versus nurture. Everyone was born to sing. We have a lot of evidence that shows us that, first of all, we think that the Neanderthals actually probably vocalized because of the bone structure in their larynx compared to previous, places of evolution in human anatomy. We think that the Neanderthals probably sang. There's a whole book called The Singing Neanderthals. We believe that humans were vocalizing before they spoke, in part because babies come out and they start vocalizing based off of what they hear the parents doing, so they mimic and they learn by mimicry. And so that probably evolved. And we know that people who had a stroke can sing before they speak. People who stutter can sing even though they stutter when they try to talk. So there's all these indications that we were born to sing. And some people are never told not to sing. They're never taught to judge their voice. And so they just naturally make great sounds. And a lot of times they come up in a family where it's a musical family. Either they make a lot of music in the house, or they go to a lot of community music events, or they go to a church and they're singing in church. And they naturally learn how to do it along the way, and they don't get entanglements that they have to fight. Then there are other people who grow up in a household where music isn't prominent. Maybe nobody sings, or maybe they were trying to sing and somebody made fun of them, like an older brother or sister used to make fun of them and say, "You have an ugly voice, don't sing." And so the singer starts to believe that to be true, and they stop singing, and then they want to so badly that they try to do it on their own. And as they're trying to do it, they end up getting entangled because they're judging their voice, and they run into troubles. And for those singers, really knowing what the parts are matters. So really, Jenna, the answer to this is everybody is unique, and everybody's background and situation is unique. And I think one of the things we really talk about a lot here is trying to help people really zone into what they do well and not worry about others, right? This whole idea of having a star quality voice, it started back in the 1800s with a lady named Jenny Lind, who they actually, and they make a version of her in The Greatest Showman, if you've seen that movie. She was the first touring star in the United States, the star singer. And before that, people just sang as part of the community. They just made music together. Jenny Lind comes and we get this star idea, and then the country started to adopt that mindset. But what I would say, Jenna, is, explore everything that your voice can do, every sound it can make, and sing the music you love, and worry more about the joy that it brings, the stories you tell, than the actual voice parts you are. And you don't really need to worry about all the parts necessarily unless things aren't working. And then if they're not working, knowing what the parts are can probably help you sing a little bit easier and reach some of the goals that you're looking to achieve.
Great. Definitely agree. If you know how the voice works, that can only help. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. But Jenna, hopefully that gets you going. So let's jump into the next question. How do I improve my riffs and runs?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot. And so I'm going to give you today I've talked about this a little bit before. I saw another question come in about it, and I thought, okay, so let's give another way to break down riffs and runs. So I've talked about this in the past, that essentially what we were trying to do when we were learning the riff was we have to learn a language, a different language. And so the language is basically the musical language. And we hear a lot of songs in Western culture based off of what's the major scale or the minor scale. So the major scale is that do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Sounds like this. The minor scale still has 8 tones that sound like this. Rocky's visiting. So that's the minor scale. Other scales, like the pentatonic, which is what a lot of riffs are built from. That's the major pentatonic. We also have the minor pentatonic. Off of that. We also have things like the blues scale. You can learn what that blues scale is. We can riff on that. So I've talked about that in past episodes, and you can look up each of those scales. And what I would say is start learning what the scales are, practicing the scales, and then skipping notes within the scales, and you can start to learn the core language. But today, what I want to do is encourage you to use YouTube and make it your friend to learn some of these riffs and runs. YouTube, if you look at the bottom of any video, has a little settings wheel, that little cog wheel. And if you click on that, it shows you a speed option. And the great thing is on the speed option on YouTube, when you're watching a music video, is it will pretty much keep the pitch, but it will slow things down for you. So what I would say is find someone whose riffs you're really impressed by, you really like Floyd Young, Ariana Grande, right? And pull down one of their videos onto YouTube, get it loading, and then find the spot where the riff is and pause it. And make sure you know where that time marker is so you can bounce back and forth. And click on that little settings wheel and slide it down to 0.5x. Which is half the speed. And at half the speed, you should be able to hear all the individual notes of the riff that the singer does. So what you want to do is sing them at that slow speed. So if they're doing whoa, just going to practice it slow. Whoa, whoa. Get it perfect. Then you can go to 0.75x and then speed it up a little bit. Whoa. And then eventually, after you've mastered that, move it all the way up to full speed, and then get it speeding along the full speed. And if you do that with enough riffs, breaking them down, and go to 0.25 if you need to really slow it down at first and hear the small individual notes. But if you take the time to learn it perfectly at a slow speed and incrementally speed it up, you're going to fine-tune all the muscles in your larynx and vocal tract that are necessary for riffing. And by learning from the pros that you admire, you're going to start to fine-tune your motor system and simultaneously learn some sentences, right? So if the scales are the language components, the riffs themselves are little phrases. So you're going to be starting to learn all these little phrases along the way from the artists that you admire. So then, as you start doing this 3 to 6 months down the line, you might find yourself singing one of your favorite songs and getting a little idea running through your mind to add into it. And that's the whole goal of this process, is by analyzing other singers, you start to store up ideas as well as motor skills into your instrument so that eventually you just start grabbing onto little things and knocking it into the song. And that's where people like Tori Kelly and Ariana Grande are already. The only difference is they've been doing it for 10 years and you're just getting started. So, Anna, if you're just getting started, take the time, do the process, and if you commit to it every day, maybe try to learn one new riff every day, within 3 to 6 months, you're going to be in a significantly different place than you are now, and I think you're going to be really happy.
Awesome. I love that tip. So get on there, find your favorite one, slow it down, and master it. So perfect. Anna, hopefully that helps you out. And definitely, I say learning those pentatonic scales is the fastest way to go. So next question. How do the tongue and jaw affect the sound? This one comes in from Ray.
Great. So, Ray, we'll break this down into a couple things. First, we'll talk about vowels. Then we're going to talk a little bit about something called timbre, or quality of your voice. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, we have the structure, the respiratory system, the vibrating mechanism. So that vibrating mechanism, like I mentioned, are the vocal folds, and it makes just a raw, fuzzy sound. In order to create words, we have to alter the shape of the tube that extends from the vocal folds to the opening of the lips, a thing we call the vocal tract, this thing is here. Okay? And through many years of research, scientists have been able to identify what positions the tongue needs to move to in order to produce a vowel. And the key thing is that if we know what those positions are, we can make sure our tongue moves into that position so that we can sing that vowel. If we get an incorrect idea of what that position is supposed to be, it can give us a lot of vocal troubles and make weird sounds. So let's take the vowel E, for example. An E needs to arch up, and there needs to be a narrow amount of space between the tongue and the roof of the mouth, like you see here. But a lot of singers end up trying to make an E by shoving it down in the back. They go, trying to get a warm sound. And as you can hear, that's not really an E now.
Yeah.
Right? So in that aspect, we got to get the tongue to arch up from to and arch it up. Then we can get E, and we can get the E's out that we want. Now, depending on your voice, your vocal quality, and the genre of music you're trying to sing, you may decide that E is a little bit too harsh, too bright. You want to make it darker, or it's too dark. All of those are vowel qualities, okay? So the tongue and the jaw, and to a certain extent the lips, help us form the vowel. Then we can make small adjustments to alter the quality. In general, anytime we make this space bigger, we're going to get a warmer quality. Anytime we make this space smaller, we're going to get a brighter quality. And not only is it bigger and smaller, as more space or less space, it's also length. If we shorten the vocal tract by spreading our lips or letting our larynx go up high, everything will get brighter. If we elongate our vocal tract by allowing our larynx to drop down and our lips to move forward, then we will get more depth to the sound. So an easy way to play with this is just to sustain a vowel like that E vowel and start moving your lips and jaw and tongue around and start exploring what sounds you're capable of making. Let's take that E. I'll start with the neutral. I'll smile through it, move things around. E. Right, so a couple of those moves really messed up the E vowel. We lost it. Others started to give it some more brightness, maybe some clarity. Other one gave it some more depth, maybe some muddiness. Right? All of those movements are going to vary person to person. So everyone has a uniquely shaped vocal tract. It'll have different widths, different lengths, different heights. Right? And so for some people, really opening the mouth will fully distort the vowel. For others, opening the mouth won't distort it as much, or it'll just change the timbre or the quality. So by exploring what I just did, I call it just playing with vowel morphing. So an you can learn a whole lot about your instrument. You can learn how the different parts move, how those parts alter the sound of your voice, and then you can use that information while you're working on a song to get the quality you're going for. So let's say that you have a high ah vowel and you don't like the way it sounds. Do that exercise of morphing through the vowel on that high note until you find the vowel quality you like, right? So the easiest things is move your lips backwards and forwards. Think of them being more north-south position like that, and more east-west position like that. Think of closing your mouth and opening your mouth as well. You can think about feeling like you have your soft palate up as if you had a British accent, or you can think of it being real twangy as well when you speak. That moves part of your vocal tract. We can think of it having a little bit more ho-ho-ho, little Santa Claus in it, or a little bit wah-wah-wah-wah-wah, like a bratty little kid inside of it. That moves your larynx, and that will affect your timbre as well. And the more that you play with this, the better you understand your instrument, and then the more control you're going to have over it to be able to do what you want to do.
Great. I love that breakdown, especially the models. When you pull out the models and show all the different positions of the tongue, I think that's pretty cool. And a lot of people, so with the jaw, right? So I know you talked a lot about the tongue, but with the jaw, so we don't know exactly what's going on here with this singer, but we want to make sure the jaw doesn't get locked, right? So we want some freedom, right? And that sometimes the tongue and the jaw can both have some tension on that.
That's a great point. Yeah, a lot of singers, the tongue and the jaw try to move together. Ideally, what you want to do is isolate the movement of the tongue from the movement of the jaw. So I like to do exercises where we go into, holding your hands on the side of your face so your jaw doesn't move, and then isolating just like the tip of the tongue. So going la 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 la. Most singers, when they first try this, will go la 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 because their tongue and their jaw want to move together.
Right.
Now, on a lot of singing styles, if you want to go for a high note and you want to be able to, play with it and go yeah, you need to be able to have that interdependence. Right.
Absolutely.
And doing that isolation exercise is going to start to give you the independence to be able to play with your sound in the way that you want. A lot of singers also don't realize that the jaw doesn't just open, it can actually shift forward a little bit. And singers can not only rotate it in the jaw, but they can drop the lower mandible down a little bit, and it creates a little bit of space in this joint, and then they can feel that the jaw shifts forward. They call this the lower mandibular maneuver, LMM. And there's some research on this that shows that if you do this lower mandibular maneuver, it actually opens up space in the back of your vocal tract, which can have a really positive impact on your singing voice. So if the singer is just pulling their jaw down and back on, oh, they might get stuck. Whereas if they let that drop down and move forward, all of a sudden they'll find freedom. And then you can find that freedom and make it either more legit or more rock. Whatever quality you want, you can play with it. But the key is to get the freedom first, and then we can find the sounds that fit the songs you're singing.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so thanks for helping clarify that. Ray, hopefully that helps you out. Let's jump on into our next question. How do you smoothly transition from your chest to head voice? This one comes in from Kiana. This is like the loaded $1 million question here, right? So
what this all comes down to is what we would call registration, okay? And so, Keanu, you have in your vocal folds, you can regulate the thickness of the vocal folds, right? The length of the vocal folds,
Right. Yeah.
how firmly together they're shut. Okay. So
Right.
our larynx model.
Yeah. There we go. Get that model out.
So this is the front of the vocal folds. This is your hyoid bone. If you run your fingers from your Adam's or Eve's apple up, you'll feel a little horseshoe-shaped bone. It's this guy right here. This is a 4.5 times model, meaning this is 4.5 times the size of a real larynx.
Looks like you got it from a horse.
Not the size of a horse. Then we have the vocal folds that are right there, and these are the arytenoids in the back. So the arytenoids help us open the vocal folds so we can inhale, and then the muscles here on the side of the vocal folds and these guys back here called the inner arytenoid muscles help us pull the vocal folds together so we can sing, so those vocal folds can vibrate, right? So depending on how firmly they're pressed together, you're either going to get, with a lot of firmness, a more edgy sound, an ah sound, or if they're only lightly pressed together, a breathier sound. Okay? Now there's a muscle that runs inside of the vocal fold itself. It's called the thyroarytenoid muscle. And basically it starts at the thyroid cartilage, which is this guy down here, thyroid cartilage, and it attaches into the arytenoids. That's why we call it the thyroarytenoid muscle. And that thyroarytenoid muscle, when it contracts, bulks up those vocal folds, it thickens them. And that can give us a little bit more buzz in the sound, a little more ah versus ah in the sound. And yes, that is kind of a similar effect to what's happening when we firmly close the vocal folds together or relax them, right? So these things all work together. While your body is trying to regulate how firmly those are closed together and how thick your vocal folds are, this muscle right here, this is called the cricothyroid muscle. It starts down here at the cricoid cartilage and goes up to the thyroid cartilage. And when it contracts, it tilts that larynx. And as the larynx tilts, it elongates the vocal folds. And as the vocal folds are elongated, it takes your pitch up. And then as the vocal folds shorten, you're going to see that the pitch comes down. Now, when that happens, you change pitches. Those other muscles that have to try to keep the vocal folds at the right thickness and the right amount of closure are all trying to make adjustments. And if your body doesn't get it right, that's when you're going to feel a crack as you change between your chest voice and your head voice. Okay? Now, that's the biomechanics, what's happening inside of your larynx. And the reason I think that's important for you to understand, Kiana, is that because a lot of people think this is a talent issue. And they go, oh, I'm not talented. I can't do that with my voice. And that's not true. That's nothing to do with talent. It has everything to do with motor skill development. If you have somebody who was never told to judge their voice when they were young and they just sang all over the place, they may have learned how to bridge those registers naturally because nobody told them to judge their voice. But if somebody else either grew up in a house where they didn't have a lot of singing going on or they were taught to judge their voice, then they may have this big break. So the easiest way to start is to slide all around your voice and just explore what's going on. All right, my friend Dr. Aaron Johnson uses this exercise. He's the one of the speech language pathologists down at NYU Langone in New York City. And he's written about this sliding through the middle. And he says just slide down through the break, slide up through the break. See if you can slide up and delay the break. See if you can slide down and delay the break. Where can you move the break? Can you do big glides? Can you do little glides? Can you glide down and almost to the breaking point and get out of it? Can you glide up to almost the breaking point and then get out of it? Just start exploring it. Then the next step is see after you know where it is, if you can start loud and start to soften up as you go up and soften enough that by the time you hit that break, you just glide through it. If you carry your loud voice up initially when you're trying to learn how to balance your registers, you're going to get a big crack. You're going to get that ah, and you're going to hear that big change happen. But if instead you decrease the volume as you go up, you should be able, if you just keep working on these slides, to train your body to seamlessly go through. Right? So you're going to play with doing it both ways. Start full, get soft as you go up. Start soft, get full as you come down. Just play around with it, and you should start to find how to navigate that area. Now, if you're running into trouble, you may want to play with vowel shapes. So if you're doing it on a really dark ah vowel and that's giving you trouble, try a bright ah. Because it's one thing to go oh versus ah, right? They can make you have a different experience going through that break. Try each and everything in between until you find the one that feels best for you. Then when you find the one that works best for you, practice that until you really get it smoothed out. Then branch out from that place. So if you were bright, but not real bright, start on that bright sound, then make it a little brighter and a little darker. And then if you keep moving darker and brighter until you run into troubles, and then just live in that zone, okay? And over time, again, things are going to start, you're going to have discoveries. Then what you're going to want to do to truly master how to make a wide variety of these sounds is to start isolating just that head register and just that chest register to start to coordinate and stabilize them individually and start to strengthen them. So we want to start taking just that pure chest register sound, working up and down our range. So we hit our breaking point. We're going to want to carry down the head voice range. Take it down as low as it's going to go. As you're doing that, you're starting to show your body the two things that you're going to need to mix. Because what we do all around that breaking point is we bring in variations of different combinations of percentages of chest activation and head activation. So first we learn how to kind of glide through that, and then we start strengthening up those parts so we can go back to playing with those glides like Dr. Johnson talks about, and delaying them even more by carrying up chest higher than we normally did. So let's say if we were breaking here, we're doing after you've been developing your chest voice, you're going to want to try to decrescendo, but stay in chest and not flip over. And then take it up and see if you can do the thing. Same thing. Then as you come down, we're going to want to start taking those 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 patterns and see if we can go from head into a light chest. Which is starting to give me a variety of qualities in that middle zone. As I start to expand the range of qualities I have available to me, the range of registers I have available to me, then when I start working on songs and I hit a treble spot, I can look at that treble spot and think, okay, so am I running into difficulties because I'm carrying up too much chest? Or am I running into difficulties because I'm mixing in too much head? You can play around with different variations. And then once you start to figure out what it is, then you can start gliding and bringing more head voice into that mix until you find the right balance for each note. Or you can bring up the chest voice until you find the right balance for each one of those notes. Now, this is where some singers really start to run into a little bit of difficulty because it's a tricky process. It's a fine, highly coordinated motor skill that you're trying to develop. And so if, as you play around with this, you're thinking to yourself, I can't do this. This is just really hard. That's okay. That's completely normal. But that's the place where some voice lessons or group classes could really help you start to sort all of this out. In a group class setting, you're going to get to be able to hear other singers dealing with their break. And you're going to get to hear what different balances of registration sound like in different voices. And as you work through all those different varieties and you learn to tune up your ears through all that listening, you'll have more to go home and play with, and you'll be able to start to really find what your stumbling blocks are and then take those back to the class and talk about them with others and come up with strategies that will help you. And if you're in a private lesson, you're going to get to have that one-on-one time for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour where you and your private instructor can really work on finding the right balance that's necessary for you and any trouble spot that you're having in any kind of music that you like to sing.
Absolutely. That's a great breakdown in terms of, chest voice at the bottom and how to get into the mix or find the mix and go from the top down. So I love the breakdown. Every time I hear you do that, I get something more about zigging and zagging through the middle. So awesome. Hopefully, Kiana, that helps answer your questions. And this actually is one of the most common areas that all singers work on. You actually probably never stop working on the transition from chest to head, especially even as your voice ages, you're always going to be working on that registration and staying on top of it. So If you are kind of maybe struggling or need some pointers, that's where a coach or a group lesson can definitely help you, navigate. Because maybe you don't exactly know the terms that we're saying. Plus, you want to have some coach listen to you. That can be helpful too if you need to get unblocked. So, okay, next question. I think we got time for one or two more. So, is there actually a correct way to sing or not really? This comes in from Russell. Personally, I think that you put any singer out there and someone's going to give you a reaction video to that, right? Someone's going to say something. So it's so personal, and we all have our favorite singers that we love. But, this is juicy. So I'm going to let you go first. And I got my own thoughts on this one.
Well, Mike makes a great point. I teach a lot of group workshops, especially pre-COVID. I was on the road almost every weekend teaching workshops across the country. And when questions like this come up, I'll bring up any given singer. So somebody like John Legend. And I'll say, who in here loves John Legend? And usually,
someone in there is raise their hands, right?
Yeah, 25% to 33% of the room's hands go up. I said, who likes him? What you like? Again, 25, 30%. Who doesn't like John Legend? You get a percentage of hands that go up, and you say, who hates John Legend? And you'll get some hands that go up. All right, and of course, people who just don't even know who he is. But as they look around the room, they'll notice that there's a whole different, a lot of different opinions on John Legend's voice. So then you'll pull up somebody else and say, okay, so now let's talk about Jason Mraz. What do we think about Jason Mraz? And we go through each of the things and, again, get a different handful of responses. Ask about a third singer. We get a different set of responses. And you'll start noticing that there are people who love one singer and hate another or are indifferent. Well, that's because singing quality, what's good, it's subjective. Some people think John Legend's the greatest singer there is. Some people think that it's Jason Mraz or somebody else, right? So if the singer is reaching you, they're a great singer, right? It's something you like and enjoy, then that's a great voice. Now, the correct is the part that then when we start getting down into the weeds. So in one sense, correct, if they're making sounds you like, that's correct. If they're making sounds you don't like, but other people like, probably correct still, you just don't like it. If they're making sounds that nobody likes, then maybe we'll have a conversation and try to figure out what's going on, because maybe something's really wrong. But the bigger question to me on the term correct is, can the person sustain that sound? Because you'll hear some people that are really trying to put grit in their voice and they're doing it like that. And when they sing, they start to lose their voice, and that's not really correct, right? And then you have other people who can find those fry screams. And they can do that for hours. And guess what? That doesn't bother me at all, because I know how to do it without any tension and constriction. So technically, that's correct. But for a lot of people, when they hear, yow, they go, oh, that's terrible. That's bad. That's hurting you. But it's not actually hurting you. It feels really fine. It's easy because there's no tension when I do it. So even though it's an aggressive sound, I'm doing it in a sustainable way, which makes it correct. I can make a beautiful sound to some ears. Make that really domey, hooked operatic sound that some people really like. But the thing is my tongue is shoved down the back of my throat. My jaw is really stiff when I'm making that sound. And even if somebody goes, oh, that's good singing because that's classical, I can't sustain that because that's not my voice type. That's me faking a sound by pulling back my tongue and jacking my jaw wide open. So even if somebody goes, well, that's classical, that's the correct way to sing, and wow is the bad way to sing, I'm here to tell you that going, oh, I'm doing all that stuff, that doesn't bother my throat. Going, oh, for 30 minutes will leave me hoarse. Because one's full of tension and one is not. So Russell, when we get to that level of correct, the real answer to that is it sustainable? Is it causing harm? If it's sustainable and not causing harm, that's correct. All right? If it's not sustainable, and even if it's not causing harm, not correct. They can't sustain it, so they can't really keep doing it. That's a problem, right? But if it is sustainable, they feel like they can keep doing it, but they're getting red all over the face and they're starting to get bumps or showing up on their vocal folds and they're starting to get nodules. Well, that's not correct either, because those nodules may not bother them now, it might be sustainable, but 6 months down the road, they may find they can't even talk really well anymore because they've done so much damage from those nodules. So it's definitely getting down in the weeds and getting into the muddy waters trying to answer that question. And if a singer is in doubt, that's where a one-on-one consultation can really help, right? Is to be able to work with a professional coach and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I kind of feel sustainable, but I'm not sure. Can you give me some feedback? You gotta make sure it's a coach that specializes in that style, right? You're not gonna take a death metal sing to an opera teacher, and you're not gonna take an operatic aria to a death metal teacher. There's some people who can do both, but you wanna make sure that the person you're going to actually has experience with your style of singing. Then you can sing for them. They can listen and watch what's going on, talk to you about what you're experiencing, and then help you decide if that is sustainable, if it's safe, if it's possibly causing harm. And the good news is, if it's not sustainable or causing harm, there's plenty of strategies that we can use to help you make the sounds you want, no matter how aggressive they are, in a way that can be sustainable.
Great. Yeah. When I first read the question, I was thinking functionally sustainable. So one, is it functioning in a way that you're not violating acoustics, the physiological laws of just that's, how your anatomy works. And then I think you hit it. Is it sustainable? Can you do it night after night, right? If it's going in your show, are you going to get out there? So besides that, I think it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Russell, there's going to be singers you love that other people don't, and vice versa. But the biggest thing we like to I'd say our philosophy is that you want to have a functionally free voice. It's functionally free and it's balanced, right? And even if you do tend to go to one side of the pendulum for a specific style or show or a different type of role you're playing or song you're singing, you want to be able to come back to find your center and find that balance. To keep it going so you can keep singing night after night, week after week. So hopefully that helps to answer your question, Russell. And write us in too if you've got a question on a singer or a voice that you want us to give you some feedback on. So last question here for tonight, and we'll wrap it up. This one's from Joseph. What is happening when I feel tension in my throat? It's like, wow, okay, that's a deep question.
So let's simplify it and try to, because we could talk the rest of the night about it. What's happening when you're feeling tension in your throat is that you are either in a registration a registration that's not balanced, right? You're doing something that's too chesty, too heady, and you're not getting the sound you want. So the muscles in your throat are trying to contract, or what we say is constrict, to try to compensate. Or you're making a vowel quality and you're producing that vowel incorrectly. As we talked about earlier in the show, we know that your tongue has to arch for an E vowel. So for instance, you might be singing E with a flat tongue. Your ear knows that's not an E vowel. So it's going to create tensions, constrictions, contractions of muscles that shouldn't be involved to try to make sound like E. Okay? So it's either wrong registration balance or wrong vowel quality. So we want to look at what's going on any given note where we're feeling the throat tension creeping in and try to sort out, is it really a registration issue or is it more of a vowel timbre issue? Okay? So the easiest way to do that is to first start that vowel morphing thing I talked about earlier in the show. If you're going, man, this note's really tight, take whatever vowel it is that note is on and start morphing it from brighter to darker variations of it. If you move things around inside of your vocal tract and all of a sudden it pops and it feels free, then it was your vocal tract that was in the way. But let's say you go through a whole lot of vocal tract positioning and you're like, either A, you can't move those parts. Well, that tells you that you're really tight in here and we're going to have to do some articulatory work to improve your coordination. But it could also tell us that you're singing with so much pressure at the vocal fold level that it's locking everything else up. And that is registration balance. So then what we're going to do is go back to sliding around like we talked about a few minutes ago when we were talking about balancing registers. And we're going to look at the notes you're singing and say, are you maybe trying to belt something, but you got too much head in the mix? It's going too falsetto-y, and so you're trying to compensate to make it sound more full-voiced. Or, which oftentimes for male singers is more of the issue, is they're carrying too much chest up, and they actually need to bring some head into it. So by sliding around through the middle, bringing head voice down a little bit, and then sliding and doing those glides where we start on a chesty sound, glide up to a lighter sound and back. coordinate and rebalance the register that's happening at the vocal cord level. And as we do that, we might discover that some of those tensions and constrictions go away. And if they do, that tells you it was a registration issue that was getting in the way. Okay? So you can work with the vowel first, move the vocal tract around, see if that fixes it for you. If not, go down to balancing out the registers and see if the registration ends up helping get those things out of the way. If not, you have a more complex entanglement, is what we would call it. Now, these entanglements can be lots of things. They're all fixable. We just got to help you isolate what it is for you, and that's where we have to hear what you're doing, hear what you're singing, and give you individualized feedback. But it could be that as you're singing, your larynx is taking a high position. And if your larynx is butting into the bottom of your tongue, pushing up into it, your tongue will compensate by pushing back. Now you have tension in your throat. It could be that your soft palate's not really lifting up. We know that people with sleep apnea have a weak, soft palate in the back. And that palate actually is so low that it can almost look like it's hiding behind the tongue. And so then what we have to do is train the body to let the tongue relax while the soft palate lifts up, so we get a hole in the back of the voice, in the back of the vocal tract, the sound can get out. And once you get that opening, you'll usually feel tensions go away. But that, again, needs some individual attention. We may find that you are struggling when you sing to open your jaw because this muscle is too tight and it's trying to bite down, which makes all of the muscles under your chin work harder, which causes feelings of tension and strain here. So we can work on teaching your body to let that muscle go. Then these muscles will relax a little bit and the throat tension will go away. We might find that your neck posture isn't optimal. It could be that you're trying to move your neck from down where your cervical vertebrae, the vertebrae behind your in your neck, attached to your shoulders, and you're trying to move your neck from there. And when you do that, it throws your throat out of alignment and it causes tension. And so in that instance, if we just remap what your spine actually looks like, how your body is actually supposed to be carried, and we get your head balanced on this AO joint, you may find that all of a sudden your vocal tract just lines up and tensions go away. Okay? But those entanglements, we usually are going to try to deal with after we try to simply see if registration balance is off or a simple vowel adjustment can make the difference. Just remember, Joseph, that everything that we do as singers is a motor skill, and it's all learnable by anybody. It just goes through specific stages. There's 3 stages of learning any motor skill. The cognitive stage, which is you don't even realize it's an issue, and you need somebody else to point it out for you and then show you how to correct it. As you start gaining more awareness of what the issue actually is and the corrections that are necessary to get the desired results, you move into what we call the motor learning phase. And in the motor learning phase, you still need a little bit of help, but you're starting to catch on. And as you catch on and get better and better at it, you start moving towards the automatic phase. And in the automatic phase, you don't even think about it anymore. You no longer even think about what the back of your tongue is doing. You just sing, and the back of the tongue takes care of itself. And that's where all of this science can lead to great artistic singing. We use the science not to get you up to sing a science lesson or a biology lesson. We use the science to get your body responding the way that you want it to respond, so you can focus on telling a story and that your voice will just come along for the ride and produce the appropriate sounds necessary for telling the story in the way that you want to tell it.
Yeah, that's great. I think, Joseph, I just want to add, if you do have any questions about maybe specific, maybe there's a specific song or specific phrase, just shoot us in a video. You can sign up, create an account at voicelessons.com, and there's a place you can go in there and upload a video. And so, we're happy to take a look at that. And that goes for any of you out there that are watching this. If you do need an outside ear, we've got coaches standing by and everything for that. So that's it for tonight's questions. Matt, do you have anything else you want to add in?
No, I mean, great questions. All of these questions, if you're watching tonight and you're thinking, I have these issues too, that makes you normal. I think that's the most important thing, is just to remember that it's normal for people to have little issues that creep up along the way. I thought you made a really good point earlier that as we age, things change. And it can change in good ways and in negative ways, right? There's things now that I can't sing that I used to be able to sing. And there's also things that I couldn't sing before that I can sing now. So, life is a journey, and we have to honor our body and go along with what our body is capable of doing. And we need to tune our body so that it can perform in its optimal, positions and condition. And when we get to that point, We then just need to find the right songs for our voice type, and a lot of these problems will start to go away. A lot of problems start when people are trying to make their voice be something other than what it is. So you have to embrace who you are, embrace what your voice is, and then find stories to tell that line up with who you are and the vocal quality that you naturally have.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And weren't you telling me there's actually coaches out there now that you can send in a video and they'll tell you different repertoire that's good for your voice quality, right? So
absolutely, yeah. There's plenty of rep coaches who will listen to you sing something, you tell them, fill out a form or something, tell them about yourself, and they can help recommend songs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that you can find music if you're struggling.
Well, great. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this week. We're going to wrap up here now, and have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.